2024. Happy New Year to all of you. We're super lucky, and I'm so excited to have Josh Hargrave here with us today for our first demo night of the season of the year. So, hi Josh.
Hi, how you doing?
Nice to have you. We're so excited to have you here.
Good to be here.
So, Josh, we usually do an interview at the beginning of this broadcast. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you, how you got started in glass?
Sure. I'm actually from this area. I'm from Crowley, Texas, so just south of Fort Worth. So my favorite restaurant's just like a block away, Benito's.
Oh, Benito's.
Yeah, it's like my favorite. I saw glass blowing at UTA. I can't remember which years. Maybe like.
It was a while ago, right?
It was a while ago.
About a decade?
More than a
decade?
2014, let's say. And I saw it. I said, I want to do that. So I started taking classes, and one thing led to the other. I learned glass blowing there. That's where I started. And then I started going to Pilchuck Glass School, just north of Seattle, Washington. I did that for 6 summers. And I've helped out here a few times, so here we are today.
Yeah, it's nice to have you back in glass, Josh.
Yeah, it's been, and then I also took like a 10-year break from glass, so I'm just kind of getting back into it now.
Yeah, so Josh's work is super experimental, really interesting. He's got some wood molds that he's brought up with him today. Will you talk a little bit about what you're planning on doing with those?
Sure. I just made out of plywood these kind of architectural geometric molds that we're going to blow the molten glass into, and it's going to fill that void and go from like a goopy organic into a more architectural and just linear, and it'll be cool to see.
So Josh has brought a few examples right over here of some work that's going to be sort of reminiscent of what we're doing tonight. The cool thing about this work is, like Josh was saying, it starts with this organic blob of glass. You know, you can hand shape it, but what he's using is a very structural form to sort of control and push it into a very rigid shape. Now, Josh, these particular ones were made with styrofoam, correct?
Yeah, I modeled the green and purple one here out of styrofoam.
It's pretty cool because you can see some of the original form a little bit in the final result, which is kind of awesome.
And then this brown one down here is actually playing with some 3D printed modeling.
Very cool.
And yeah, these are all blown. They're hollow. Let's see.
So they start with like this very blobby hot mass, and then they get shoved into a very rigid mold, right? And then blown into.
Exactly.
So very, very cool forms.
And then, you know, I do bowls and vessels as well.
Yeah. So one of the really awesome things that I've noticed about Josh is that he tends to work very experimentally, but also very traditionally. And so if you guys are interested in coming out and seeing these pieces that we have in the gallery, we'll have them up tonight. So if you're in the neighborhood, feel free to stop by and check these out. They're pretty amazing in person. All right, Josh.
All right.
You ready to work?
I'm ready.
All right, so you guys, we have a live stream going for maybe about an hour. We're gonna stream for the first piece. If you are online watching, you can chat with us and ask us questions. We can pass them on to Josh and he can respond. So feel free to do that, but you know the magic really happens when you're here in the studio. So come by, if you're local, come by, check it out. Josh is like really, really awesome, probably willing to answer all of your questions. So feel free to stop by and hang out with us. All right.
All right.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
We'll catch you in there, and then Amy, you can go on in there and we'll show everyone what we've got going on.
All right.
This is Josh. Everyone say, hey, Josh. Hey, Josh.
right, so you guys, like we were talking about, Josh is going to be working in the studio today. We've already got a number of people who come to hang out with us. So if you guys are local, feel free to come hang out with us. Now Josh has got a wood mold, like we were talking about, set up right here that we're going to be blowing into. So this mold is pretty fresh. It's not been burned in or anything like that. So you guys, hopefully if you've been watching if you saw the pieces that we had in the gallery, you can see that rigidness is going to translate to the glass. So everything that we do always starts with the furnace and a steel pipe. Now, Josh is making these forms hollow, which means he's going to start with a blowpipe. So that's a hollow tube of steel. And this is our furnace. So the heart of every glass blowing studio generally has a big old pot of clear glass. And that glass is kept at around 2100 degrees or so, pretty much all the time. So you're gonna watch the artists kind of work with the clear glass to start, and then color is always applied later. So at this point, Josh is just prepping what we call a color. It's just a little bit of clear glass on the end of the pipe so that he can pick up a bar of color. So those of you who are joining us online for the first time during this demonstration, you're going to see us use a number of tools. If these are unfamiliar to you, feel free to let us know in the chat and we'll explain them a little bit further. I'll try my best to do that while I'm chatting with you guys online too. So Josh is using a table, which is steel, to cool and shape the glass. That table is called a marver, M-A-R-V-E-R. And generally its purpose is really for shaping. It's kind of like a tool, but anytime you touch cold steel, you're also cooling the glass off. So after a little bit of heat, Josh is going into this color box, picking up color, and then walking right back over to the reheating chamber to heat it up again. Now this color box that we just picked color up out of is sitting at around 1000 degrees or so. And that's just really so that the glass color does not crack. Now if you guys have ever put a cold piece of glass on you put something hot into a cold piece of glass, or you put a hot glass dish on a cold countertop, you know that glass does not like that, right? Usually will end up shattering, very often very violently. And so that's the reason we bring the color bar up to about 1000 degrees or so before picking it up, so it doesn't shatter. Now you're also going to notice that Josh very often will be going into this reheating chamber and then coming back to the bench and working. Going back into the reheating chamber and then continuing to work. And very much that is so that the glass continues to stay moving as well as so that it doesn't crack. So Josh is using what we call the jacks, the strap of the jacks to kind of mush all his color back. But once color is on, you can see the difference between the color and the clear, hopefully. The clear looks very, very, very orange. And that's just because of the heat. So it's certainly not going to stay orange as it cools down. So Josh is going to pick up another piece of color from that color box. And again, back into the reheating chamber, right, to heat it all up. Now, every so often there's dust on the bottom of these bars, so we dust it all off to make sure that we're not leaving contaminants in the color. Josh, what colors are those?
It's a cobalt blue and violet.
Cobalt blue was the first one, and then a violet after that. So he's going to probably have this very cool transition in color happening, right? Are you going to go in with a third color, or are you just using two?
Just these will see some iris vanilla later.
Oh, cool. So this is going to be a blue and a violet transition kind of happening. So he's put these two colors back to back. Are they both transparent? Okay, both transparent colors.
So the head, the hat, the hands, the banjo, the body, the tail, the legs.
So if you guys have never watched glass blowing, you are in for quite a treat. Glass is super magical material because it doesn't go instantly to a liquid. It has this transitory period where it goes from a solid kind of slowly into a softer material. And then eventually, if you heat it up long enough and hot enough, it goes into a liquid form. So why that's really cool is it allows us to work like this.
I would probably mess up several times, but I'm not going to tell you that I did.
Yeah. So as you work and play with the material, you start developing the catalog of form and a catalog of process in your mind. So
we're using that steel table, the marber, again to shape up the
as you go
glass.
through that process, there are going to be little subtleties that you may have to deal with. Sometimes those subtleties are easy to overcome. Sometimes they're a little
Now, those of you who have worked with glass before, these are all going to look pretty familiar to you. But if you've never worked with glass before,
still creating.
very nice thing to do is go to your local glass blowing studio and try and take a class, take a little workshop. Now, Seneca Studios, one of the main things we do here is we do teach classes and we do events like this. So completely free. Tonight's demo is brought to you guys through grants. So feel free to come out, check us out on the second Friday of the month, of every month, if you want to watch some glass blowing for free. But if you're interested in coming and trying this out for yourself, we do teach tons of classes.
Little bits here and there, not a big deal. When it's big concentrated pieces like that, that can slowly tint all that clear glass.
So really
whatever
nice
that color
shape.
glass is, which in some instances,
Now Josh has got his color applied, but he is not ready to blow things out quite yet. We do need more glass. He's going pretty large with this form, so we're going to be adding clear glass to this and then slowly starting to blow it out. So you guys don't forget, if you have any questions about this process, you can certainly put it in the chat. We have a couple people hanging out on our chat to answer questions, and certainly I can try and answer your questions as well.
thermal stress is a very real thing.
Now, if you're thinking about taking a class with us or any glass blowing studio, I highly recommend you do it at this time of year because it is nice and chilly out. If you're waiting until the summer, you're probably not going to have as good of a time because the temperature does affect your experience working with glass. As you can imagine, we're working with a 2100 degree material, so it's nice and hot, which means that in the summer it's not as comfortable to work in here.
Got another layer of clear glass.
Now we've got some clear glass, even though it looks bright yellow, bright white, bright orange, we've got some clear glass on this color.
The closer you can be to the glass, the better you can
which is going to allow him to make this form a lot bigger.
The dark to a bright, that's about as close as you'll ever
Now
get
Josh is using a block
to the object.
made out of fruit wood,
Notice anytime we're at the bench holding the left hand is turning the pipe.
and that is going to shape everything up really nice into a Q-tip shape. You'll notice that he's dipping it in water, and that water is keeping that block nice and saturated so that it doesn't burn up too fast.
And we were working with you, making a thing.
So this is a great base shape. It's a great starting shape. This Q-tip shape is what a lot of us start with when we're blowing glass. What it allows for is we're going to push some air into this to make it hollow, right? And so that Q-tip shape is really nice for pushing a round bubble of air into. Now glass blowing is very much a team sport. You'll notice that Aubrey is jumping in to help, as well as Phoenix over there behind the bench. A lot of glass makers do work by themselves, but most glass blowers have a team that they work with.
Without having to worry about burning yourself. This is about 6 full sheets of newspaper, folded in thirds.
So Josh is using a newspaper, which is a really, really fun way to work with glass.
So getting water. So as long as that is wet, or
Now this is
the glass is riding on a rail of steam. So it's very much to be
now this is
frying pan. That water just dances around.
Josh is going for a bubble in this form, and he's just realized that he needs to push some air into it before he has his assistant work. So he's putting a little bit of air in.
Thank goodness they're soft colors. So what Josh just did is introduce a tiny bit of air pressure by blowing fast.
The newspaper is one of the coolest tools because you can almost shape the glass with your hand. Now, newspaper, of course, if you're using dry newspaper, it's going to burn up real fast. And so we keep the newspaper saturated very well. And the moisture from the newspaper helps to prevent it from burning up too fast. We're taking another gather over that, yeah? 2 more gathers. All right.
Let's say you're doing some details. You've got some.
So in order to make a bigger form, Josh has got to gather a lot more mass of material
In a specific manner.
in order to make sure it's not too thin. So you'll notice that whoever's sitting at the bench, the main artist or the gaffer, is generally directing the team. They're in control of the piece at all times. And you'll notice that they're constantly turning. Whoever is handling the pipe is always turning. And that's because glass, as it's warm or hot, it tends to be super susceptible to gravity. You'll want to meet the floor very fast if you stop turning.
It's good to have a certain level of fear in here. It creates a respect between you and the material. Thankfully, it is a very.
So you'll notice that when the glass comes right out of the furnace, it's super bright orange. On camera, it looks really white hot. But in person, it's glowing orange. And as the artist works with the color and the clear, it kind of cools down. And you can see more of the color come out. So these fruit wood blocks are super helpful for getting that nice base Q-tip shape.
A lot of times you can use gravity to change your shape. So sometimes as you're getting seated at the bench and you're angling down, that people out of gravity will stand this off the pipe.
And having great assistance is definitely a big part of blowing good glass. So Josh has got a couple of great assistants with him today.
So we may use that pipe as a doorway, open up the door, slide down, and then scoot your butt down to get seated. It's not scary.
This is my grandmother.
Hello, grandmother. Welcome. Have a seat. Stay warm.
So you'll notice now the teamwork has really begun. Joshua is directing Phoenix to give him some air. So as he's shaping, Phoenix is blowing and inflating. Now every step in glass blowing has to be done with care and real attention to how thick the glass is, what the glass's shape is, where it's cold and where it's hot, as well as the overall heat of the piece. Glass doesn't move without it being nice and warm and toasty. So as it cools down, it generally needs to be reheated so that it can continue to be shaped.
Stand up and look at that wooden crate. That's what we're making. Oh. Pretty cool, huh?
So notice as we're working, Phoenix is blowing, Josh is shaping and turning the pipe.
Lean your head over that wooden crate.
It's there's so many moving parts in this field when you're working with glass. So many moving parts.
Basically, he passes out. Somebody will catch him, I promise.
Now because we're going in with more gathers, you're going to see a couple of these moves happen over again. So Josh has got to let that previous layer of glass set up so that it doesn't move around too much when he is taking his next gather.
So again, we'll let it get cool. Get a new layer of clear glass on top of it.
This will be my final gather for this piece.
4 gathers. And we kind of judge the scale and size of the piece based on the amount of gathers you can get. So generally speaking, a 4 gather piece is a pretty good amount of material. You will see the end form. The color is going to be a little bit deceptive because.
So you guys, again, if you are local, if you've never been to Seneca before, but you live in our Fort Worth, Magnolia area or nearby, feel free to come by tonight. We're going to be working from 6 to 9, although this live stream is only going to be for the first piece. So definitely come on by and check it out. Josh is going to be working until about 9 p.m. tonight.
Reds, oranges, and yellows always look massive.
So glass is pretty amazing. This is about like 2100 degrees on the end of the pipe there.
So the bigger the block, the bigger the tool.
So as Josh is working now, we've got Aubrey helping him turn.
It's got a nice tight grain structure.
I know Josh is fairly tall, so this glass doesn't really look like much, but that's about 4 gathers of glass. And so it's very heavy, very hot. And you can see he's going for that nice Q-tip shape once more. Again, it's a really nice base shape to start most forms with.
What you did, Phoenix? Ooh. So Phoenix has a couple of small gathers of clear glass on that solid rock. She's going to get some colored glass. They're going to get some colored glass on the surface, and then that's going to be brought over to Josh and wrapped around the exterior of this material to add an additional color and a different pattern.
So Phoenix has got a little bit of glass on the end of this punty, and this looks like I think Josh said it was Iris Vanilla, which is a gold color. And so you guys saw us pick up this rod earlier, right? That's what the base started with. This is called frit. It's basically crushed up glass. And so that crushed up glass is just an alternative way of adding color to the glass material. Now, generally we have to put on a couple of layers of color in order to get it really nice and dense. Yeah. Yeah, you might just want to give it a little quick wipe with your hand, just in case. Maybe not right in. Bet that's hot. So again, we're putting a little more color on. And then this is a little bit that's going to be applied, kind of like a wrap around that glass that Josh has got. So a wrap is basically like a spiral of glass going around the main piece.
Josh, how heavy is that?
It's not light. It's cantilevered out. So imagine holding a bucket of water, but at the end of like a broom.
Oh, God.
Because I can't hold it up here.
He's maybe got 10 pounds of glass on the end of that pipe. Every foot away you are from the head of the pipe, the weight physically doubles. So if he's 2.5 feet off, that's going to feel 35, 45 pounds. And if that object gets further away from the head of the pipe, that also changes your weight distribution pretty dramatically too.
So Josh is finishing shaping up this piece.
We'll try and keep this as compact for as
Someone in the audience asked a great question about the weight of the piece. Now, Josh has got about 4 gathers on here, which is probably equivalent to about 10 pounds or so, maybe a little more than that.
these guys will talk
And then
back and forth with each
it sounds like it's not very much. 10 pounds of glass doesn't sound like it's very much at all. However, when you have all your weight distributed on the end of the pipe away from you, and you're not able to hold that 10 pounds in your hands, the weight of it goes up exponentially. So although it might be about 10 pounds, it might feel more like 30, 40 pounds when you can't get that close to it. So that's something to keep in mind when you're working with glass blowing, is you can't hold that weight right in your hands, right? It's super hot. And so the weight distribution is something interesting. People take a little while to get used to that, as well as, of course, getting used to the constant rotation, the constant moving, the dance in the studio.
17 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. So the glass is just hot enough where it will slightly deflect the roof. If we got it back up to that 2100 degrees range, it would be really, really soft, really, really flexible. We actually wanted at this point to be a little rigid. So when the wrap gets brought over and stuck to it, the middle of this isn't going to fall off.
So Joshua is doing basic shaping in preparation for this wrap that Phoenix is going to bring him.
Basically what looks like a giant cone on
He's got to make sure that this is not moving too much, because we want the wrap to be nice and gooey, and we don't want the base to be moving around too much. So communication is super important.
Gonna bring it over,
Phoenix is
stick it, and then draw that thing back.
talking with Josh about how they're bringing that bit. And then Josh is kind of dragging everything around that bubble, that main bubble. Now we're adding just a little bit of color, and it looks like not much. It doesn't look super fancy,
So now we just got melt this in.
but at the very end, that color that he put on does get a very cool metallic finish. So it's gonna go gold, even though it doesn't look like it right now.
So we've got that nice decorative wrap on the top. The color that's been added is an iris,
Vanilla.
iris vanilla. So it's going to have a little bit of a creamy undertone. Once this is finished, it'll get hit with this fluffy torch.
So for those of you who are just joining us online, remember that we are demonstrating in person. There's a number of people in here. Our bleachers are full. So come on down, check it out. Josh is going to be demonstrating from 6 to 9 p.m. tonight. So we have plenty of time to come and check out one of his pieces that he's going to be making. I think the plan is going to be to do 3 or 4 of these. So if you're not here at the moment, feel free to stop by later this evening.
But you can see where the heat is traveling up that pipe, adding more and more heat.
Now Josh again is using that marber
Back on that pipe.
to kind of shape
What's called a marker.
things up.
Historically, it would have been made out of some type of stone.
So a lot of control, making sure that he never stops turning. He's also got to keep in mind that that steel table is cooling everything down. So as you're working, you got to go back in and heat to make sure you're not overcooling the glass.
Yes. We started much smaller, like only 2 gathers instead of 4. We wouldn't break in right now.
So you can see some of that metallic finish kind of coming
So
through.
you can see that wrap is now reducing.
Every time we kind of touch the newspaper to it or a block to it, that metallic color is going to kind of come to the
If this
surface.
smoke is bothering you now when we get ready
So we'll
to drop it
see
in,
that at
like
the
I
very
said,
end in the
on
final
way to the
piece
gallery,
as well.
it is gonna get real smoky here.
That newspaper's gonna be gone by the end of the night.
We have more. We can fold you up more.
A lot of people also ask us about, like, why don't glassblowers wear gloves or heat protection? What you see Josh wearing is pretty typical. So generally we're wearing natural fibers to make sure that if we do get burned, that the material doesn't melt to our skin. So natural fibers are really great for that.
It's all about setting the form up to fit into that mold. Are you gonna neck before you drop it
But
in or after?
making sure your skin's covered a little bit, as well as you see that yellow sleeve that he's got on there. That's a Kevlar sleeve, and it does help with some heat protection.
We're gonna bring it back with the
But
bench.
wearing gloves does happen every so often when the glassmaker's hands are very, very close to the glass,
And then using the newspaper
or if they're doing a lot of sculpting and things like
primarily, we
that.
want the bubble to flow slowly towards the tip. However,
But it's
since
not
we're
all the
going into
time.
mold, we want a fairly even air pressure to push that bubble down towards that base, so we get a really nice even wall thickness. So Josh is protecting primarily close to the head of the pipe and not out at the tip.
Sorry.
Are you? I don't think so.
All right, so a lot of prep work for blowing into this blow mold.
Pardon? Leverage wise, probably in the 30-pound range.
So a lot of this is prep for the piece, and then the piece happens pretty quickly. Because once the glass is prepped, it goes into this mold, and then there's not a ton more that happens after that.
So this is an instance where Josh wants to protect his hand.
So Joshua is putting on a glove. Remember, we talked about it's not always the case, but sometimes if your hands are getting really, really, really close to the glass, you may need to wear gloves. So Josh is going in with his neckline or jack line, which is just a constriction in the glass so that we can break this glass away from that metal pipe eventually. So because his hand is right over the glass, he's getting heat right up against his arm, which I can completely understand why he wanted to wear gloves at this point, because that's a big mass of glass that we've got there, and it's giving off a lot of heat, and his hand is super duper close to the glass.
It's like a constant campfire.
So you'll notice that they're working in unison. Aubrey's very much turning as that jack line's going in, and communicating with each other about when the direction's changing and things like that.
Constriction line that was just made
Super
will
duper
be the
important
bottom of the
for
object
making
once
a
everything's
successful
finalized.
piece. So we've got a big part of the shaping done. Josh has got his jack line in.
Or glass stretches.
His goal here is really to make sure that the glass is distributed nice and evenly and that it's a good shape for blowing into this mold. That kind of thing comes with practice, as well as knowing what kind of mold you're going into and how you need to distribute the glass for that mold. But generally you want the biggest bubble that's going to be pretty close to the shape of the mold, knowing that your glass is going to sort of stretch as it's going into that mold as well. Now, if you missed me showing you guys what that mold looks like, I'm going to show you guys that right now. So we've got this mold. It's basically a bunch of wood that's been stuck together, and it's not been used before. So we're going to create a lot of smoke when we do this, because this is a brand new mold. Now Josh has got to shape it so that it goes all the way down that mold, which is like a long kind of little bit of a skinny bubble. Because that mold is pretty nice and deep, so you'll see him, he's kind of lengthening it out, stretching it out just a little bit.
It was pretty good. Pretty good. Not gonna lie. What do you think? A couple more heats and stretches?
Yeah. We'll just want to make sure it's a good shape to go in there.
Yeah, so he's got a couple of moves to make sure it's a good shape going into that mold.
Stretches before he drops it into this mold.
This process is really, really easy to mess up if you don't have the right shape going in. So it's important to spend some extra time at this point kind of shaping everything up.
Barbecue. If you didn't get enough s'mores making, your opportunity will end so short. How far?
So again, stretching a little bit to try to get it closer to that shape.
How's that feel?
You guys, I can't say that if you try this for the first time that you're going to be able to do anything like this. However, if you want to do this eventually, you can. You got to start with something small. So come and take a class. You can take a class with us. You can also potentially take a class with a local glass blowing studio if you're not close to us. But things always start with something small. So definitely go take a class.
That's our fluffy torch. That's just nice propane heat, soaking it up into the section by the neckline. That way it gets a little bit hotter, because whatever goes into the reheating oven first is always going to be the hottest thing. Josh actually wants this to blow out a little heavy at the side by the pipe, so adding that with the fluffy, that heat with the fluffy torch will give it the opportunity to expand equally throughout the entire thing. So we're kicking on the big vent fan. It's going to get real loud. I'm not even going to try and talk. Good luck.
All right, so some of you might have missed what was happening just now, and they basically were heating up the back end. So that's what you saw Josh torching for, that big fluffy propane. is torching that back end close to the jack line, just to make sure we give a little bit of heat back there. He's got a lot of expansion in this mold, and it's tapered. It's like an upside down pyramid. So he's gonna want to expand it toward where the jack line is. And so we've got a lot of heat. And then I'm gonna follow him over to this mold as he's going by. Now a lot of this magic is kind of stuck in there. We've got a bunch of smoke coming out of this mold. Even though it's wet, even though there's a lot of water, this is a brand new mold. So Josh is blowing in there. All of the glass is expanding. And then when they're ready, when he thinks he's got enough expansion, he's going to come out of there with a beautiful form.
There we go.
Pretty amazing, right? So beautiful experimental form. You can see some of that color we were talking about earlier.
So now you can see that color faded out. We've got the cobalt by the head of the pipe fading into that beautiful purple. We've got the wrap that's already reduced because of the smoke from the mold. So Phoenix is playing dress up. In just a couple of seconds, they're going to break this off into their hands and put it in the cooling oven.
So pretty cool. The magic happens in just a couple of minutes, you know, with mold blowing. Really, really cool form. So Josh is torching a little bit just to even out the heat. We've got Phoenix, who is all suited up. Now suiting up happens because they're going to be grabbing onto this piece and putting it away into an annealing oven. So the annealing oven is going to cool the glass down real slow. But in order to make sure that this glass doesn't crack, we've also got to make sure the heat's nice and even all the way through. So if there's any spot that's a little hotter, we got to kind of even out that temperature.
Last flash.
So this is the final moments before we put it away into the annealer. That constriction is going to get a little bit of water applied to it. Then Phoenix is grabbing onto it. We give it a little smack. And then the piece goes away into an annealing oven to cool down.
Beautiful. Nicely done.
Very nicely done, Josh. So you guys, remember we're going to be demonstrating until about 9 p.m. So if you guys want to come by, check it out. We've got about 3 more molds we're going to hang out and do. So come on by, hang out with us. We've got a crowd here. And everyone's asking questions, so this is the best place to be. It's nice and cold outside, and it's nice and toasty in the studio. So do come by. We're going to be cutting off our live stream and continuing to record locally. So if you guys want to keep watching some cool glass blowing by Josh Hargrave, come on down to Seneca Studios, and we'll see you soon.